Well, let's talk about like your work. How would you describe your work? What
God.
people that haven't seen the Umbrella stuff that you've done, how would you describe it to them?
Well, I guess when we talk about the illustrative stuff, most of my key influences are guys like Geiger and Frazetta, old school comic book horror guys like Bernie Wrightson and that. Simon Bisley is another big influence of mine. Anyone who's seen sort of Judge Dredd 2000 AD comics from around the sort of mid to late 90s would be familiar with his style. Very sort of like punk version of Frazetta, very muscular kind of stuff. Mine's kind of sort of sits in a mix between that. I think there's that kind of, I try to bring a sharp edge to what I'm doing, but I like to sort of noodle away and get details. It's a bit of a hard, I don't know, I can't think of, I can't sort of point at another artist and say my stuff's like that.
Yeah.
That's good. That's because they do have a distinct look. Because you can look at From Beyond or Re-Animator, or even if you look at the zombie titles, Zombie Holocaust and Zombie Flesh Eaters.
Yeah.
The release, they have a very similar kind of colour palette that you work with.
Yeah, so I like to sort of play with a pretty rich and varied palette. I used to dabble a lot more in a lot of black and then subtle colours, but I guess the cinematic stuff I've tried to sort of really broaden the palette. So like the design stuff, if you've seen the Zombie Flesh Eaters or Zombie Holocaust covers, which are sort of collage work, but again, trying
and people can find the stuff online,
Yeah. I mean, if you go to a site, redbubble.com, and just punch my name in, you'll find me. I'm on Twitter, Simon Sherry on Twitter.
Facebook as well?
Yeah, Facebook.
Group,
you find me, you can Google me. Don't confuse me with the very muscular, very homoerotic images of a guy called Simon Sherry Wood, who was in one of the Real Worlds, and we battle it out for top spot.
Nice.
Anyone who sees the footage will see I'm clearly not. I could lie and say that was my younger years, but no. But you Google me, you'll find me, or if you do Simon Sherry Artist, Simon Sherry Art or something like that, you'll find it.
Which we should mention, we are filming this particular segment of the podcast, so that
we are.
This artwork we're talking about, you'll be able to watch.
Yes, we'll add it in post, so you'll be able to see that.
We'll do nifty, filmy things with it,
and there'll be a link in the little description.
Is that good?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to go all the way.
It's just bells and whistles.
Yeah. All right, well, one question I had for you as an artist coming in, I was talking to Jarret about this earlier on. How does an artist balance the creative originality of their work with the whole marketing objective? Is there a fine line, or is it do you have to sacrifice some of your own ideas for the marketing perspective?
Well, it's an interesting one. I was actually talking to a friend recently about this, that for me, I try to keep audience in the forefront when I'm doing any commercial work, and I don't find that to be bad. To me, constraints tend to, trying to find the best way to put it, constraint can produce better work.
Right, yeah.
I think it's a common thing with filmmakers. You see some guys that get given the world to play with and no control and no constraint, no oversight or anything, and we end up with films that go on for 18 hours.
Paul Thomas Anderson.
I was just thinking, like Dan Harmon was talking about with regard to his latest version, series of Community on Yahoo, and one thing he keeps bringing up in his podcast is about, I don't have a villain to play against. I don't have somebody to, rebel against, and his big anxiety seems to be that, and it's something I sort of feel like if I get to go completely amok, you're like, well, you don't have a voice of dissent there.
Yeah.
So I try to kind of put it in my mind when I'm doing commercial work.
And do you have your own self-imposed restraints, or is there voices above you saying, no, you can't do that because we've got to sell this in a different way? Or
well, you always have, in various departments, like the sales department will have their own opinions, and the higher ups, and then you've got people with the retailers as well. It's always good to get input, as Jarret would know. We've had discussions about stuff, which is fantastic because you guys are on the front line of the consumer base, but also, like, particularly with horror stuff, I've been trying to sort of I've always been kind of keyed into the community, but I'm trying to be a bit more vocal and engaged. Like, there's a great Facebook group which are the horror
DVD,
DVD and Blu-ray. So
horror
shout out to those
appreciation.
guys. They've been really great actually in their, they've been great cheerleaders of the stuff I've done with the Stuart Gordon stuff, but also seeing their other discussions about things that they want to see and what works and what doesn't work for them is great because it gives you that insight. So I guess there's no strict voice, but I sort of try and keep my ear to the ground to see what people might want and then use that to help inform what I'm doing.
Excellent, because you're one of those artists that's bringing back a real retro, old school sensibility.
Cheers.
Where poster art back in the 70s and 80s told a story. These days they just sell faces.
Yeah, it's a pretty common. I mean, I guess part of that is probably budget. Like you don't see a lot of. I mean, there's been a resurgence, but in illustrative poster art. But from what I've seen, that's more collector market, like your Mondos and maybe niche independents that manage to get somebody to do art for them. A lot of the time, I think that art departments don't get necessarily given the budgetary freedom or the time. So not just money, but time to produce something. And then I guess certain things are expected to sell.
You also get those generic posters where 3 or 4 films have the same image.
Head, title.
Exactly.
Exact same title.
We've got a blog article on our website about that where we put up all the. Remember when like Dark Knight came out and you had that lone hero. Same with the second Star Trek film and with this big cityscape in ruins and that.
And in one centre sort of focus.
That's right.
Yeah, well that's it. You get tropes all creep in.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look.
And it becomes fashionable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if it works, if a film works, then the key art kind of gets married to it. So one film has a hit, and that key art is something that was everywhere and people recognise it, people want to leverage off that, So they go, well, look, that format works, so just do that. One of the things I guess I've been lucky with the stuff like, again, the Stuart Gordon films and the older titles is that you get an opportunity sometimes to reinterpret something. And because it's not out there in the cinemas, you kind of, I guess, protect it a little bit.
I guess too, with Umbrella being almost exclusively genre orientated, you have a bit more creative freedom in the genre work. Whereas stuff like, remember you, me and Dupree and Just Married, those posters all look the same because put Ashton Kutcher's face on it. Whereas
the white background,
you're working with films that don't have star power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I mean, people who are familiar with cult film and and genre television will know a name like Jeffrey Combs because he's been he's played umpteen different aliens and across all the Star Trek TV show since Next Gen and films like Re-Animator, but like how many other genre films are character actors like that tend to have weight, but to the general public no one's going to necessarily know who he is. And I guess it's an interesting one with Re-Animator and From Beyond. My feeling when I did that was to try and avoid, to my mind, the trope that's current with the illustrative posters, which is kind of that Struzan collage. So it's kind of trying to bring back that key head. It's still headshots and effects, and don't get me wrong, there's some magnificent stuff there. I love it, but when I look at, say, a film like From Beyond, and there were several versions out there, I was lucky too that some people on that Facebook group had every fucking version of that film, so you get to see a photo of them all. One thing that's pretty obvious is that you start to see the same things, the same, it's executed differently, executed well, but it is that same look, and I wanted to give us something that gave us a bit of export potential, so that people overseas hadn't seen it. But also I wanted to play around with an aspect which to me is the key thing with those films, like particularly From Beyond, it's that grotesque, flesh melting body horror that erupts from this unknowable place that they've managed to tap into. So I wanted to do something kind of harking to my mind. I can't remember the artist's name, it's killing me. But he did like the covers for Brian Lumley's Necroscope series.
Yeah, actually,
So that was kind of my inspiration there.
There's also like a little hint of Clive Barker's artwork in it.
Yeah, it's that kind of monstrous sort of, grotesque creature as opposed to trying to give you that person's face.
Yep.
And then with Re-Animator...
Though that said, the likeness was quite good. With,
for that.
with absolutely From Beyond, because if you look at the UK one, the second sight release, or even the Scream Factory release, the second sight completely missed it. Didn't remotely look at all like Jeffrey Cohen. It was like nothing.
Well, if you're getting that from a couple of eyes and an exploding forehead, then
yeah, well.
Question is 9 to 1.